Every athlete leaves something behind. Not just records, but moments that changed the way the game felt. Some stories are loud. This one isn't. Tonight, we slow it all down. And listen. This is The Quiet Power of Hank Aaron, a cinematic bedtime story of baseball, grace, and silent strength. It begins with stillness, a soft Georgia wind brushing through the pines. The kind of breeze that makes the curtains sigh in old houses, that lifts the scent of magnolia into the humid dusk. Somewhere on the edge of Mobile, under a patchwork sky of deep cobalt and scattered stars, a boy lays awake. His name is Henry. No one calls him Hank yet. Above him, the tin roof ticks and cools. Below, his mattress sags under time and sun-faded sheets. Through the cracked window, chirping crickets form a quiet orchestra, and fireflies rise like embers from the earth. He is not yet a giant, not yet a record, not yet a myth, just a child with calloused hands and dreams taller than the pine trees. The moonlight slips across his face, revealing eyes that do not blink. A storm stirs somewhere inside, gentle but certain. Not anger, not ambition, something older than both, a kind of inner knowing, like the echo of something waiting to be remembered. The other children are asleep. The world forgets itself in slumber. But Henry listens, to the porch boards stretching under their own age, to the distant echoes of a train carrying people far beyond the horizon line, to the sound of a game he hasn't yet played but already understands. The bat he carved from a branch rests beside the bed, smoothed down by patient hands. It's not perfect, neither is he, but there's something unspoken woven into both, the way a river knows its course long before it reaches the sea. History does not announce its arrival. It shows up quietly, wrapped in dusk and stillness. And at this hour, no one sees the weight that will one day find its way onto his shoulders. No fanfares, no prophecies, only a boy, and the whisper that he was made for more. And maybe that's how the greatest stories begin. Not in a roar, not beneath the blinding light, but in the soft hush of a warm southern night. Before the swing, before the chase, before the world was ready. The game was already reaching out. And Henry was beginning to reach back. He wakes with the sun, thin light spilling across a floor worn smooth by bare feet in morning routines. The house stirs slowly, wood groaning, pots clinking, a radio whispering gospel from somewhere down the hall. The air smells of biscuits frying in a pan, but Henry's already laced his shoes, canvas frayed and soles thin as leaves in October. Outside, the red dirt clings to everything: shoes, cuffs, memories. It doesn't clean easy, but it holds stories. His feet move with purpose, worn paths toward the lot where the other boys wait. Mobile, Alabama, a place of hard lines and soft dreams. The sidewalks are cracked, the paint peels from porch rails and school walls. Signs tell him where he can go and what skin is allowed through what door. But Henry's eyes don't look at that. They look past it, past the fences, past the gravel streets that rattle with passing trucks, past the rules written by people who never bothered to learn his name. He carries a bat made orange with Georgia clay and hours of use. A ball soft with wear. If it rains, they'll still play. If he's tired, he won't show it. Not here. Not with the boys who run like freedom is something you can steal one base at a time. There's a rhythm on these lots. Bats grazing stones, gloves snapping shut, laughter like wind chimes. He doesn't talk much, but when his turn comes, the others hush. Because Henry swings different. It's not strength, though the strength is there. It's timing, balance, a grace that seems borrowed from something greater. Like he's tapping into a language older than words. He doesn't know the numbers. Not yet. He doesn't know that one day, men in polished shoes will chase his statistics. But he knows how the bat feels when it catches a ball just right. Knows how the sound travels, sharp, clean, like a pebble skipping across still water. He tells no one what he sees when he plays. The feeling that he becomes something other. Lighter. That the world fades until it's just him and flight and a kind of truth with no need for language. The other kids notice, not in ways they can explain, but they slow when he hits, lean forward when he fields. There's always one in every group, that quiet one the wind follows. At the store, Mr. Sanders lets the white boys go first. Henry waits, doesn't complain, just presses his coins into his palm, worn thin from chores. Doesn't matter. He's not here for soda. He's here for the magazines in the corner. The ones with box scores and legends draped in pinstripes. He traces their names with curiosity, not jealousy. Something anchors in his chest. Not I wish I could, but I will. Back at home, there's work before supper. Water hauled, clothes scrubbed. He moves through it steady, unfazed. Sometimes, when he finishes early, he sneaks out again, to the alley near the train tracks, where shadows stretch long and the ball skips unpredictable off gravel. He likes it harder, unfair, real. He doesn't talk about what it's like, being black in Alabama, watching your father retreat from white men in uniforms, hearing your mother soften her voice on the phone when she speaks to the bank. But he feels it. Stores that close early. Eyes that linger longer than they should. Roads you don't walk after dark. Still, he carries no hot coal in his chest. Only a quiet fire. A kind of stubbornness dressed as humility. The world's small here. 24 blocks, 3 churches, 1 school, and a boy with hands too quick to belong to anything but a game. But his swing reaches further. Even he can feel it. When he lies down again, under that tin roof that hums with night, his mind drifts, not to fame, or fans, or the thunder of crowds, but to a simple truth. What if I don't stop? What if I just keep swinging? And in that question, something begins to take root. Not hope, not yet, but something close. A seed of promise buried in red dirt. And ready. They call it the Biscuit Club. Not because of the food, there's rarely any to spare, but because most mornings start with the promise of warm biscuits from someone's mama, wrapped in a napkin, split 6 ways between boys with bigger dreams than stomachs to fill them. Their ball field is nothing but an open lot behind a shuttered church. Red dirt swirled into patches by bare feet, bases drawn with rocks or lines etched by sticks. Sometimes there's a bat. Usually not. A broom handle does the job. The ball is half-stitched, sometimes made from twine stuffed in socks and taped shut. But none of that matters. Because every morning, the sun climbs blank and open above Mobile, and Henry is already there. Thin shoulders, worn shirt, that same quiet fire. The others joke, duck, sprint, shout. Henry doesn't. He listens. Stands a little apart, then steps in. The outfielders back up without being asked. There's something in the way he holds the bat. Not pride, more like reverence. It's as though the game isn't something he plays, it's something he enters. He waits, reads the pitcher, breathes, then swings. The cracked ball soars against the morning sky, cutting through birdsong and porch chimes, rising like a secret freed from the ground. The boys chase it down whooping, one falling headlong into a bush. Laughter echoes. Someone swears they'll get him next time. Henry just smiles, small and private. They play until the sun eats the shadows and someone's called home for chores. When the lot empties, he stays behind, picking up stray rocks, smoothing the dirt with his foot. Quiet work, holy work. He never says it out loud, but he loves this place. The hiss of sweat down his temple. The silence between pitches. The truth of the ball when it's struck just right. Here, he's not colored. Not poor. Not waiting in the back of a line. Here, he just is. He walks home with the bat over his shoulder, dust shadowing his clothes like armor. Past streets where boys his age shine shoes or bag groceries. Past windows that never let eyes meet his. At home, his mother fusses over his socks, his shirt, the sunburn on his nose. His father nods once at his return, pride folded deep within the silence. Later that evening, Henry steps to the backyard with his broom handle marvel, tossing rocks into the air and swinging as the sky bruises to purple. Each swing echoes like a soft promise. He tries again and again. The sound of contact rolling down the block like distant thunder. The neighbors grow used to it. That rhythmic thwack, that boy alone with his dreams and his silence. Eventually, darkness says enough. The fireflies come out, blinking like faraway stars. Henry leans against the fence, sweat cooling on his back. Nobody claps. Nobody rewards him. But that doesn't matter. This is where it begins. In red dirt, on borrowed time, in shoes with holes and socks bunched at the heel. Not in wealth, not in spotlight, but in rhythm, repetition, reverence. Every swing is a question asked into the wind. Every connection, an answer. He doesn't say it, doesn't need to. He knows something now. His swing, this spell he casts with wood and will, might just carry him past these fences, past mobile, past everything tried to hold him here. It's not a dream anymore. It's a rhythm taking root in his bones. And one day, it's going to rise. The ball came in slow. Not lazy, not weak, just unhurried. A looping pitch from a boy 2 years older, cocky in his stride, sure he could blow it past Henry like he did the others. But Henry didn't blink. He didn't brace or shift. Just stood there with that handmade bat resting like an extension of his arm, the morning light warming the red clay along his forearms. There wasn't a crowd, just the usual handful of boys, some barefoot, one with his shirt tied around his head like a crown. They weren't pitchers or catchers. Just kids with nowhere else to be, trying to burn time before supper. But for Henry, time didn't burn. It waited. He watched the ball as if it had stories to tell. As if he could read its seams and spin like Braille. And when it finally neared the plate, he moved, not fast, not forceful, but fluid. A swing like breath, like a note played true. Wood met leather, soft and exact, and the sound it made wasn't a crack. It was something rounder, fuller. A tone that cut through the noise of birds, boys, and distant radios like it had always been part of the song. The others turned, squinting. The ball lifted, not high, not wild, but sure, cutting through the light's edge into the open sky over the lot. No outfield fence, no scoreboard. Just wide space and a rising arc. No one chased it, they just watched. It landed past the scrub grass, kicked the dust once, then rolled against the base of an old discarded tire. One boy jogged out, slow and whistling low. Another muttered something that sounded like damn. Henry didn't smile, just walked back toward the scattered gloves and laid the bat gently on the ground. It wasn't his first hit, and wouldn't be his last. But something about that swing settled deep, like it had unlocked something inside him. Not in words, but rhythm. Connection. Like he had found the right key to a door that had always been there, just waiting for the right hand. He sat on the edge of the lot later, arms folded over his knees, watching dust lift in low wind spirals. Listening to the quiet that follows when something good happens and boys aren't sure why it mattered. No one knew what to say. So they didn't. They just started packing up, fighting over who had to carry the ball next time. But Henry stayed behind, toes digging slowly into the dirt, eyes unfocused on a horizon he couldn't yet name. Something inside him had clicked. Not pride, not hunger, just clarity. He could still feel the swing in his bones. It wasn't power, not entirely. It was knowing that between the pitch and the sky, there lived a place only he could reach. A space opened not by force, but by timing, patience, and something ancient that spoke when he listened. That night, under the stars with that bat beside his bed, he lay quiet, hands behind his head, heartbeat echoing the rhythm of that swing. No trophies, no paper headlines, just the feel of contact, the gift of flight, and an unspoken promise settling deeper into the marrow of his ribs. I was made for this. And whatever it is, it's only just beginning. The television barely works. It hums more than it speaks, wrapped in static like fog clinging to morning. The screen flickers, gray shapes that drift between reception and ghostlight. But when the picture lands, the room stills. Henry sits cross-legged on the floor, one palm bracing him, the other resting gently on his shin. From the couch behind him, his father exhales slow through his nose. His mother folds laundry with the soft rhythm of someone used to waiting. And on the screen, through the crackle and fade, a man runs. Jackie Robinson, wearing 16 shades of gray, his number blurred, his swing clean. Henry leans slightly forward, not in awe exactly, more like recognition. Like watching someone walk a road he's only seen in dreams. Jackie slides past second, dust kicks high. The crowd, muted but alive behind the screen, roars a silent storm. "You see that?" his father murmurs. Henry doesn't speak. He just nods once, barely. He doesn't know Jackie, has never heard his voice, doesn't know the full name of the man trying to strike him out. But in those few flickering moments, he understands something that doesn't need unpacking. It can be done. The walls they built weren't made of stone. Someone's already broken through. After the clip ends, the screen fuzzes into white noise. His mother turns it off with a gentle hand. The lights stay low. The room stays quiet. But Henry is somewhere else now, chasing an idea that just got a name. Robinson. In school, they barely mention him. Some teachers look uneasy if the name comes up. But Henry finds books, old clippings, magazines left behind in cafe chairs, folded toward the middle. He reads every word like a hymn. It's not just the speed, or the stance, it's the restraint, the silence louder than fists. Jackie ran even while the world yelled stop. And he ran fast enough to make them quiet. Henry doesn't want to be Jackie. That road's already walked. He wants to honor it by walking further. He starts watching more closely now, not just the players' hits, but their stillness. Their poise. Their refusal to yield when the world shoves back. Black men in white uniforms, chewing gum like steel, carrying an untold weight in their gait. He sees what most don't. What most aren't willing to. That the swing is only the surface. He walks with a straighter back around town now. Not louder, just steadier. Still waits at the back of the line at the store. Still gets passed over, but none of it breaks through. Jackie didn't throw his bat. He put it where it needed to be, and let the world catch up. And Henry? He's learning to do the same. At night, his bat rests by the bed again. A better one now, bought secondhand, but held with reverence. He counts breaths between imagined pitches. Practicing timing, even in dreams. Sometimes, he doesn't think of the crowd. He pictures Jackie alone, in the locker room, lacing his shoes, thinking, just one more game. Just one more reason. And Henry carries that thought into every swing. He starts noticing how people look at him when he hits. Not just the boys. Grown folks too. A glance too long. A pause. As if they feel the shift before they can name it. He feels it in return, but he keeps quiet. His voice isn't the point. The swing is the sermon. The game is the gospel. And Jackie was the first chapter. Henry's wrists tighten around the handle. His vision grows clearer. This story doesn't end with number 42. Not now. It's only just beginning to find its next voice. One carved in silence, and carried by swing. The bus rattles. Not loud, but steady. A kind of hum that seeps into your bones and makes every mile feel longer than it is. The windows are streaked with dirt, the seats uneven with springs that groan under the weight of tired bodies and heavier dreams. Henry sits toward the back, a paper bag at his feet with everything he owns: glove, socks, a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. The label stitched onto the uniform in his lap reads, "Clowns," but he's not sure what to make of that yet. There's laughter at the front, cards slapping onto folding tables, voices rising and fading like static. The engine drones. The road stretches. It's 1951. He's 17. The clowns are part baseball team, part barnstorming act. They play to live and laugh, not just to cope, but to sell tickets. Vaudeville meets fastballs. But Henry doesn't joke. He just wants to play. And he can. Boy, can he. The first time they set up in a patchy lot somewhere outside Memphis, the other players grin, loosen their shoulders, ham it up. Henry stays quiet, takes his place, waits, then swings. A liner hissing past the shortstop like it had something to prove. Then another, and another. The crowd hoots. The pitcher scowls. It's not flair. It's precision, grounded in hours hitting stones, socks, whatever dared fly across his zone back in Mobile. Before long, the others stop teasing his quiet. They admire it. He listens more than he speaks. Eats in silence. Reads signs as they pass, not the street names, but the ones hung in diner windows. The ones that separate bathrooms and bar stools. He knows where to stand, where to nod, not speak, where not to sleep, but on the field, he takes up space. Bats over .360 before the season's half done. Turns heads in towns that never heard of Henry Aaron. And little by little, a name begins to circulate. Not loud, not big, but clear. That Aaron boy, the quiet one. They watch as he runs the bases, loose and low, like gravity's just a suggestion. They notice how his wrists snap through the bat like they're skipping rope with fate. Sometimes, the shows run late. Floodlights buzzing against moths, outfield full of shadows. Sometimes, they play in segregated parks, black fans on one side, white fans squinting from their own. But the ball doesn't check who's watching before it leaves the bat. And Henry? He doesn't check who's watching either. He keeps his head down and his numbers up. When he gets his payment, he doesn't spend it. He folds the dollars, tucks them in a worn envelope, and mails them home. His mama writes back. Her letters are short, but her words hang like quilts in his chest. "We miss you. Be careful. Keep going." So he does. Keeps going through towns with names he doesn't remember, faces he tries to forget. At one stop, a white man spits near his feet before the game, says ain't no colored boy hitting off Jimmy today. Henry goes 3 for 4 with a triple. Never says a word. Late one night, when the game's over and his cleats are untied, he sits on the bus staring out as gas stations blur by. Not thinking of fame, not trying to chase records. He's just trying to outrun the limits the world keeps trying to draw around him. And he's starting to believe he can. One road at a time. One hit at a time. Wrapped in silence, but growing louder with every mile. The envelope is thin, no return address. Just a postmark smudged from rain and the warm curl of a corner touched too many times. Inside, a letter, and an offer. The Boston Braves want him. Or maybe need him. The line between the two is hard to see. The boys on the Clowns are proud, slapping his back, telling him not to forget them when he's swinging in big league parks. But they also go quiet when the bus pulls away from Henry's stop. When a friend leaves, even for good reason, it echoes. Henry reads the letter again that night, seated beneath a lamp too dim for its job. He doesn't understand everything they wrote. Talk of development, and minors, and long-term potential. But he knows enough. He's wanted. Then, a week later, another letter. This one from the Milwaukee Braves. Same roots. Different place. Further north. Newer chances. He stares at both papers side by side. One carries weight. The other carries something else, something harder to name, but no less important. Opportunity isn't always the loudest knock. Sometimes it's just the door that doesn't look locked. He sits with his father on the back steps. They don't speak for a while. Just pass a jar of water between them. The Mississippi cicadas sing around them, tired, steady. The night hangs heavy. Then Henry murmurs, almost too soft, "Milwaukee." His father doesn't ask why. Just nods once, slow and firm. That way men do when they're handing down approval they also earned through years of sacrifice. Milwaukee it is. The train ride north is long. Strange towns slip past the windows. The snow shows up faster now. The trees look wooden and foreign. He watches everything until it blurs. They meet him at the station with too many cameras and not enough questions. Too much smile, too little understanding. They see the bat, the swing, the numbers. They don't see the nights, the quiet, the letters mailed home with small earnings folded into soft corners. They call him potential. He doesn't argue. He's used to being written before he's spoken. In Eau Claire, he plays like he always has. Simple, focused. That swing, the one stitched together in dusty churches and red clay lots, starts turning heads coated with winter breath. His average climbs. His name too, letter by letter. Local reporters ask where he came from. Mobile, he says. Ask what drives him. He shrugs. They say the polite things. Then move on to other prospects. But coaches notice something different. He barely speaks, but he doesn't stop. When the season ends, there's talk of moving him up. Maybe Jacksonville, maybe higher. The news doesn't reach him first. He hears it through someone else, standing in line at the equipment shed. He grins, but only slightly. Takes it in, then starts running wind sprints, unprompted. Come spring, he's on a new field. The lights are brighter, the crowd's louder, but the swing? The swing remains. He still writes home, still reads every letter twice. And still, after every practice, he stays late, hitting until the shadows stretch long enough to reach back home. He isn't trying to be known. He's trying to be ready. Because somewhere ahead, buried in innings he hasn't yet played, is the moment he'll be called not just to bat, but to carry something bigger. Something heavier than wood or numbers or names. And he can feel it. Close now. Closer than ever. The lineup changed with a whisper. One outfielder slipped on a damp patch during warm-ups. Twisted his ankle just enough to limp. Just enough to open a space. Just enough to summon a name that hadn't yet settled on anyone's tongue. Henry. The coach pointed. No speech. No prep talk. Just that small nod men give when the decision's already been made. It was April 1954 in Milwaukee. Wind chewing through the ballpark, cold enough to make gloves stiff and bat handles bite. Henry jogged to the outfield, cleats singing quietly on the dirt. The stands weren't packed. April never drew full crowds. But still, heads turned. Number 5, not yet a number remembered. Just a boy with long limbs and eyes that drank in every edge of the field. He took his spot and left. Grounded out his first at bat. The kind of grounder that barely makes the radio broadcast. Rolled over a low pitch, trudged halfway to first before peeling off. He didn't look upset, didn't dwell. Back in the dugout, he sat near the end. Shoulders relaxed, elbows on knees, listening more than watching. Somewhere in the stands, a fan folded their program. Said he didn't look like much. But Henry knew better. Because beneath the wool uniform and borrowed cleats, a familiar rhythm had returned. A pulse just behind his ribs, humming in time with the cadence of the game. Not nerves. Recognition. He belonged here. Maybe not the shining debut. No homers. No spotlight. But something had shifted. A door opened, however slightly. And once history invites you in, it rarely asks you to leave quickly. Over the next days, he stayed in the lineup. Not because of flash, Because of steadiness. Small moments layered on top of small moments. Singles that snuck past the glove. Doubles stretched from ordinary hits. Routes in the outfield taken not with show, but sense. Reporters tried to coax quotes. He offered shrugs. The veterans teased his silence, but respected the way his bat didn't seem to notice pressure. It just swung like it always had, in backlots, biscuit fields, bus station towns. 1 week became 2 weeks, a month. By the All-Star break, his average hovered close to .300. By season's end, people had stopped calling him a fill-in. He wasn't replacing someone anymore. He was anchoring something. Years later, they'd ask when it all started. When the arc of greatness found its first curve. He'd think back to that day, the ankle, the nod, the wind curling around the bleachers. And he'd know. Something began that afternoon. No grand opening, no speech, no swing heard round the world. Just a name scribbled into a lineup card. Just a door cracked open by chance. And a boy who had never needed an invitation. Only an opening. He walked through it without noise. Without pause. And never looked back. They start calling him Hank. Shorter. Easier to headline. Easier to cheer. Easier to forget there's a whole person tethered to the swing. In clubhouses, on radio waves, in the slanted columns of Monday papers, Hank Aaron begins to take shape. But Henry, the boy from Mobile, doesn't vanish. He just steps further into shadow, content to let the bat do the speaking. He doesn't laugh much with reporters. Doesn't offer the juicy quote. A handshake, a nod, a murmured, "Thank you," that's all. Some call him cold, others call him boring, but he isn't cold, he's composed. In a league addicted to spectacle, Hank is an echo of something older. Patience, grace, repetition, resolve. He studies pitchers like puzzles. Memorizes arm angles like scriptures. He doesn't chase pitches. He selects them, as if choosing words carefully in a poem he hasn't yet shared. And slowly, the numbers climb. Not in bursts, but in tempo. 26 home runs, then 29, then 34, then 40. He stacks seasons like bricks, each one a chapter of a novel no one quite realizes is being written in real time. He doesn't boast, but teammates know. If you need the hit, Hank will find it. If you need the run, he'll get there. At first, the crowds don't chant his name the way they do for flashier men. Willie with the flair, Mickey with the myth. They call Hank reliable, like that's somehow less. But steady doesn't shine until you stack it high enough to touch the stars. Off the field, he's one of the only black players in Milwaukee. Some stores watch him too closely. Some fans cheer a little too tightly, as if trying to prove something to themselves. Some letters arrive with no return name, just smears of ink and threat in all caps. But Hank says nothing. He shows up for batting practice early. Leaves the locker room last. Nods to the man who sweeps the stadium aisles as if they've always known each other. He buys a modest house. Sends money home. Marries. The papers ask his wife to smile bigger in photographs. She doesn't. She knows what he carries, and what he carries it with. In interviews, Hank's voice stays level. Measured. He calls the game what it is. Wears pencil suits and modest watches. Still shops for his own groceries when he can. One year, a new player jokes about his silence in the dugout. Asks if he ever gets angry, ever yells. Hank smiles, the quiet kind, and says, "Only once, but it wasn't worth it." The clubhouse laughs. And when the next season starts, Hank hits .328, with 104 RBIs. And a swing that seems pulled from the wrist of God. No commercials, no national spotlight, just impact, accumulated like rain filling a barrel. By now, pitchers know better. They tell the rookies, don't give him the inside pitch. Don't assume he'll chase, because he won't. He'll wait. He'll let you make the mistake. And then he'll punish it with the force of a man who never asked for thunder, but can summon it with his wrists. He signs baseballs with clean cursive, sends thank you notes with each endorsement check. At church, the elders call him Steadfast. At home, the neighbors just call him Hank. He reads the papers each morning, then folds them neatly. People start asking if he'll ever catch Ruth. He doesn't answer, not because he doesn't dream it, but because dreams, to him, are meant to be lived with your hands, not your mouth. And Hank's hands? They're just getting started. They weren't supposed to win. Not in Milwaukee, not that year. No one circled the Braves in the spring. No magazine covers, no bold predictions. Just a team with solid arms, quiet bats, and a right fielder who didn't say much but swung like he meant everything. Henry didn't care for predictions anyway. Baseball isn't played on paper. It's played in the hush before the pitch. In the split-second pop of a fastball meeting bat. In the quiet resolve of men who know suffering and still choose patience. Through April, they climbed. Not in leaps, but in inches. Other teams had noise. Milwaukee had rhythm. A heartbeat that pulsed beneath every inning, steady and unshaken. And at the center of it, there was Hank. By August, the country started paying attention in flashes, regional stories, murmurs about a club punching above its class. But the spotlight never found them fully. Still, the wins stacked. And so did Hank's numbers. .322, home runs, 44, RBIs, 132. He wasn't motivated by the math. Wasn't chasing trophies. He just showed up, day after day. Swing after swing, with a dignity that didn't crave credit. Come September, the Brewers faded. The Dodgers pressed in, but the Braves kept moving forward, 3 steps at a time. Then came the night they clinched. The air was damp, the crowd rowdy, but not disrespectful. When the final out fell into a worn glove, the city of Milwaukee erupted into something it had never tasted: championship. The Braves had done the unthinkable. Everyone rushed the field. Reporters shoved microphones into faces. Voices cracked from shouting. But Hank? He stood off to the side, helmet tucked beneath his arm, eyes scanning the chaos like it was happening on a stage across the street. A grin flickered, soft and unsure. Not modesty, just restraint. He hit the pennant-winning homer in extra innings to seal it weeks earlier. 400 feet of silence turned magic. And now, looking around, that swing echoed louder than the cheers. In the World Series, they faced the mighty Yankees. Champions on loan from mythology. DiMaggio gone, Ruth gone, but the pinstripes still carried weight. But Hank didn't flinch. He hit .393 in the series. Drove in 7 runs. Ran the bases like he was retracing the steps of every boy who had been told they'd never get this far. The Braves won in 7. And still, the papers pointed elsewhere. Spoke of surprise, of team effort, of luck. As if grace wasn't effort. As if consistency didn't deserve glory. In the locker room, the champagne sprayed. Laughter ricocheted off metal lockers. And Hank? He called home. Told his mother softly, "We did it." No headline could hold that moment. Years would go by, and people would look back at 57 as a statistical entry. A footnote to dynasties and dry spells. But they'd miss what it really was. It was the year a man who didn't shout led a team that wasn't supposed to matter. It was proof that you don't need fireworks to alter sky. You just need direction. And one swing, taken again and again, with the faith that enough truth always breaks through. For the rest of his life, Hank rarely mentioned that title. But he carried it, in the way he walked. In the way he waited out breaking balls and bigotry. With silence full of strength. With grace sharpened into impact. The letters kept coming. Thousands of them, stained envelopes with misspelled names. No return address, no signatures. Postmarks from every corner of the country. Messages written in pencil and venom, packed tight with fear masquerading as warning. Some began "Dear Hank." Others didn't bother with the greeting. They accused. They warned. They begged him not to break the sacred number. Not to pass the ghost they couldn't let go. 714. Babe Ruth. A myth, a monument, a man they revered enough to believe he should not be joined by someone with Henry's skin. One letter called for his death. Another offered a time and a place. Many didn't need threats. The hatred curled in every syllable. He read them quietly, then tucked them away. Shoeboxes in closets. Drawers locked at night. Sometimes his wife would open one by mistake, and the silence in the kitchen would grow a little heavier. He told no one, because if he stopped to hold the weight of their fear, his hands would never make the swing. The numbers kept rising, home run after home run, each one a step closer to history, and a step deeper into danger. He didn't chase the record the way they said he did. He just kept doing the work, day after day, not for the headlines, not for the applause, because baseball was the one place in the world where the rules didn't change based on who you were. 3 strikes was 3 strikes. He earned every pitch. In 1973, things tightened. He hit number 713 in a road game bathed in tension. Tied Ruth with 714 on a swing that cracked through more than just leather and air. He didn't smile after that one. Didn't thrust a fist toward the sky or soak in the cheers. He jogged the bases with his head low. Because he knew what came next. The country was watching, some with awe, others with rifles. When he took the field the next day, security tripled. The fear no longer crept, it bellowed. But Hank did not sit. He did not delay. He did not ask for protection from the very people who wrote him down in hate. He played. Every swing, a sermon. Every run, an act of resistance cloaked in routine. Behind the numbers, there lived weariness. Behind the records, a quiet war. Not against players, not against pitchers, but against a country that struggled to celebrate and swallow him at the same time. He knew what they whispered. That the numbers didn't count unless they came from the right man. That the right man couldn't look like him. But the bat made no such distinction. And neither did the ball, when it hissed off the barrel and climbed into forever. The closer he came to the summit, the lonelier it got. Some fans wept for Ruth. Some raged on the radio. Some jeered in the seats, even as their children clapped beside them. But Hank never answered hate with noise. He answered with motion. He stood tall in the box, waited for the pitch, and played the only way he knew how. Straight, clean, exact. He knew history would see the swing. But he also knew most would miss everything it took just to stand still. He carried the weight without complaint. Carried a country through its contradictions. And he did it while wearing a number stitched in cloth, not carved in marble. They came for him in the letters. But he answered them the only way he could. By stepping into the pitch anyway. And swinging. The night was cool, clear, the kind of evening where time feels like it exhales. April 8, 1974. The stadium in Atlanta hums with something not quite nerves, not quite celebration. Just a quiet, collective breath held so long it aches. Henry Aaron steps into the box. No music, no ceremony. Just a man, a bat, and the weight of a number worn thin by whispers. 714. He ties the back of his glove tight. Rolls his shoulders once. Settles his feet like he's done 1,000 times before. This swing, if it happens, won't be for show. Won't be scripted from the myths they've written on stone. This swing will be his. Al Downing whines. The pitch comes in. Fastball. Belt high. Crack. A sound more truth than echo. It leaves the bat like it's always known where it was going. Center left. The ball climbs, not in hurry, but in purpose. For a beat, nobody breathes. Then, gone, over the fence, over the myth, over the doubt. 715. He rounds first like he always does, head down, rhythm easy. But something follows him this time. Not just cheers, but release. Not just applause, but memory being rewritten in real time. Two fans leap from the stands and jog beside him. Young, white, smiling. He doesn't flinch, doesn't push, just keeps moving. Like this moment, for all its noise, still belongs to silence. He touches third, turns for home. Waiting there, his mother, sprinting through the din, arms outstretched. She hugs him so tightly her hat falls off. The flashbulbs explode, trying to capture what can't be captured. Not really. Because this wasn't just a swing. It was exhale. It was proof. That grace could persist. That strength didn't need to scream. That a man born in red dirt silence could touch sky and come down whole. He doesn't wave, doesn't strut. He accepts the ovation with that quiet certainty, 39 years old, shoulders bent but not bowed. The broadcasters try to make sense of it. The reporters scramble. The world wants a quote. He gives them a few words. Thanks God, thanks his teammates, and quietly thanks the city, still learning how to love him. In the press box, someone whispers, "History has been made." But he knows better. History wasn't made tonight. It was answered, because the swing wasn't about breaking anything. Not Ruth, not records. It was about revealing what had always been there. A truth some tried to silence. A power they chose not to see. It was about every letter he received. Every mile he rode. Every field that told him no and every quiet step forward anyway. He disappears into the dugout. Still not raised on shoulders. Still not crowned in gold. Just a man, lacing his hands behind his back. And breathing at last. The stadium lights dim slowly, like waking eyes adjusting to early dusk. The season ends with no fanfare. No curtain call. Hank walks off the field with dust on his cleats, quiet in his chest. There's applause, scattered and kind, but it fades quickly, overtaken by the roar for younger legs, newer names, fresher myths. Nobody tells you how loud silence can be. He shakes hands in the locker room. Smiles, barely. Folds his jersey for the last time. The fabric thinner now, threads worn soft through seasons, slides, summers. He doesn't announce his retirement. Just steps away. Like always, graceful, measured, unseen by cameras not pointed in his direction anymore. There are dinners, speeches, awards, but even the praise wears echoes. They don't know what to say to a man who never sought spotlight but became the beam by which other dreams found shadow and shape. In private, he grapples with something heavier than bat or ball. Who am I now? Not bitter, just unsettled, because when the game is your language, silence feels like exile. He keeps to himself, sorts mail, drinks coffee slowly, watches games from the television with the sound turned low. Too many voices, too little truth. He visits schools, talks to young players. They ask about the home runs. About 715, about Ruth. He answers kindly, but part of him wants to talk about the nights. About the thousands of swings no one remembers. The ones that built the bridge to glory. He works in baseball still. In offices far above the field. Makes decisions, reviews tapes. Signs papers. The game shifts around him. Flash becomes currency. Grandeur, strategy. But Hank stays the same. Clean lines, quiet manner, firm eye. He learns to garden. Trims hedges with the same precision he once reserved for hitting coaches' notes. Finds joy in things that don't clap when finished. He doesn't miss the games. He misses the rhythm. The smell of pine tar. The way the ballpark sounds in the hour before gates open, empty, holy. For a while, he stops going back. Even when asked. Even when honored. Because too often, honors feel like goodbye cards written by people who weren't paying attention while you were still in the room. But memory has its way. And time, in its gentleness, dims the stain. So he returns. Once. Then again. A slow re-entry, not with fanfare, but recognition. Old players greet him with slow nods, younger ones with awe they rarely understand, only inherit. He watches batting practice, smiles when the ball jumps off the bat a little too soon. Offers small advice when asked. Keeps the rest for himself. He sits in the third row. Not behind glass. Not above the dugout. Among the people. Fans come, some shy, some shaking. They say thank you. For the swing. For the stand. For the quiet. He nods. Tells them it wasn't just him. Never was. And that's part truth, part humility. Because no one climbs alone. But still, not all footprints leave the same shape behind. In time, the cheers return. Not loud, not wild. Just warm. The kind of applause that doesn't chase relevance but remembers reverence. And Hank doesn't chase the feeling. He lets it arrive when it will. Because he knows better than most. Glory isn't the sound of the crowd. It's what you carry long after they stop clapping. And he still carries it. Every day. Softly. But without letting it fall. They always talk about the numbers. 755 home runs. 2,297 RBIs. 3,771 hits. But numbers are clean. Numbers don't flinch. They don't bleed, or break, or tremble under the weight of a nation learning to look at itself. What they don't tell you is what it cost. They don't talk about the nights he couldn't sleep, lying in hotel rooms with the curtains pulled tight. Not to keep the sun out, but the fear. They don't talk about the cities where food was unavailable, where cab drivers refused to stop, where police cruisers followed a little too long, then disappeared just before intersections turned unfamiliar. They remember the swing, not the silence he had to maintain while crowds shouted things his children weren't allowed to hear. They recall 715 with joy, not with the death threats that arrived 2 months before, promising to turn the moment into something else entirely. They replay the highlight, but they don't know how it felt to walk across the parking lot, past men holding banners that read things no father should have to explain to his daughter. Every season, the weight grew heavier. Not from expectation, but from permission. The permission people felt to treat him not as a human being, but as a symbol they couldn't accept. He knew he wasn't just playing baseball. He was doing what they told him he couldn't. Doing it better than anyone, without anger, without violence, without applause more often than not. But always, with grace. He ran the bases with fans threatening his life. He signed autographs with hands that had just opened another envelope warning of bombs. He smiled for cameras while wondering if his name would appear in tomorrow's paper next to something far worse than a box score. And still, he played. He played through it all. Not because he didn't feel it, but because if he stopped, maybe they'd win. Maybe silence would be mistaken for surrender. He kept going, because someone had to. And he knew that every time he stepped to the plate, full stadium or empty, friend in the stands or not, he was answering back. Not with fury, but with flight. He endured. So that the number wasn't just a milestone, but a testimony. Not to greatness, but to survival. To persistence. To walking into rooms that weren't built for you and refusing to leave quietly. They celebrate the stat lines now. The records engraved in bronze. But the weight he carried? It never made the box score. Never showed up in the highlights. It lived behind his eyes, under his cap, beside his name in every lineup card. It was the extra layer in his stride. The pause before the smile. The fire no one could see but fueled every single swing. And the miracle is not just that he bore it, but that he bore it with such unwavering dignity. And never let it change the swing. The calendar stopped mattering. No alarm clocks. No away games. No stretches in the on-deck circle while the crowd stirred like static behind him. Now there's morning light on the kitchen table. Coffee in a chipped mug that's outlasted 3 presidents. Headlines folded neatly. A newspaper not about him. Not anymore. And still, he reads every box score. It's quiet, not the unsettled silence of waiting, but the full-bodied hush of something past, like a field after rain. Like a hymn with no second verse. He walks through the house slowly, not from weakness. Just listening more closely than before. The creak of the floorboards, the patter of birds along the fence, the ticking radiator. All of it becomes a kind of comfort. A rhythm he never had time to hear when he was still chasing daylight and records. They think retirement means rest. But for a man who never craved noise, it feels exactly the same as it always did. Just without the dirt on his uniform and the questions waiting in the tunnel. At first, the phone rang often. Events, awards, interviews. They wanted to look back, to wrap his story in a ribbon and place it on a shelf. But he was never one for wrapping things up. Just completing them, then moving on. So the calls thinned. The letters slowed. Glory grows quiet when it's no longer convenient. And yet, he remains. He's still here, in a chair by the window. In the simple act of sharpening a pencil. Clipping shrubs. Writing birthday cards in long, looping script. Sometimes he goes to the park and watches the kids play. None of them know what he's done. They just see an old man who smiles politely and never calls out advice. But once in a while, one of them hits a ball just right. And Hank leans forward, ever so slightly. He still walks through stadium tunnels sometimes, shoes softly echoing. Security guards glance, then suddenly realize who just passed by. They fumble for pens. He signs without hesitation. Still graceful. Still calm. There are younger executives now, slicker suits, brighter ties, talking analytics, market dynamics. He listens. Offers suggestions only when asked. They've started calling him Mr. Aaron, again, almost like he's fiction. He smiles at that. He sits on boards, approves budgets, helps build programs for kids who remind him of himself, the quiet ones, with questions no one asks but talents no one's taught how to hold. Sometimes the mailbox is full. Not with headlines or hate now, but with memories. Letters from fans who were boys once. Grandmothers who watched 715 with tears in their eyes. Teachers who used his name for courage on chalkboards. He reads them slowly, answers some, saves the rest. His wife still says his name gently. Not like a celebrity, like an old promise kept. And that's what he is now. Not a legend, not a number, not a statue at some ballpark gate. But a promise kept across decades. That you could move through fire without turning cruel. That silence could be strength. That dignity could be louder than applause. When the lights are low and the house is still, he sometimes tapes games on mute. Just to hear the rhythm again, the thrum of the swing, the crisp drop of a ball into leather. He watches the young ones rise. And wonders which ones will last. Not in stats, but in silence, in patience, in carrying something no one else sees, without letting it change them. He never wanted to be remembered as great. Just real. And now, as the days slow and the crowds fade, that's what remains. Not the numbers carved in stone. But the shape of a life, lived without fanfare, lit only by the quiet fire within. Still burning. Still enough. The stadium buzzed with anticipation. Not the kind Hank knew, organic, tense, reverent. This buzz was different. Louder, brighter. Cameras blinking like fireflies. Voices sharper, full of debate. It sounded like spectacle, not history. He wasn't there in person when Barry Bonds hit number 756. Chose to stay home in Atlanta, sitting in a modest room filled with quiet and memory. The TV flickered without commentary. He didn't need an announcer to tell him what the crack of a bat meant. And he knew it when he heard it. A fastball, a swing, a ball that climbed just enough. Over the wall, into forever. 756. Hank sat still, spine straight, hands folded in prayer without the whisper. He watched bonds round the bases to thunder and fireworks. Hands raised, a sun lifted skyward. There were many who saw betrayal. Who whispered about pills more than perseverance? Who scrawled asterisks in bold ink? Who said the crown had been stolen? But Hank said nothing. When asked for comment, he looked into the lens of a camera and spoke in that same steady cadence that had traveled with him through towns and innings. I extend my congratulations to Barry Bonds on becoming baseball's all-time home run leader. It is a great accomplishment which required skill, longevity, and determination. He meant it, not because he didn't understand the questions swirling, but because he knew something most didn't. The record had never lived in the number. It lived in what it cost. In the weight carried from pitch one to the last. In the nights spent outrunning history that didn't want to be caught. He knew what the bat didn't reveal. Bonds had his own burden, but not Hank's. Not the letters. Not the lonely hotel rooms. Not the full stadiums where only pockets dared cheer. Not the invisible resistance woven into the very fabric of his uniform. 756 changed the books. But it didn't touch the legacy. Because a legacy can't be passed the way a baton can. It has to be built. Brick by brick, swing by swing. Bonds had the numbers, but Hank still had the silence. The respect. The grace not everyone understood, but most could feel. He didn't need to raise his voice. He had never needed to. The moment came and went. The news cycle spun, and Hank returned to his garden. Trimmed the hedges, tied back the tomatoes. In the evenings, he'd sit under the porch light with a scorecard and a quiet heart. He knew what remained. That records fall. But truth? Truth survives whatever tries to replace it. And in his truth, Hank was still walking tall. Still carrying the crown, even with no gold left to polish. In the back of a hallway closet, behind worn jackets and a shoebox of old ticket stubs, there sat a box not marked, but known. Henry never talked about it. Not in interviews. Not at banquets. Not at charity galas where flashbulbs popped like firecrackers and everyone wanted to remember the best parts of history, but not everything. Inside the box, letters. Some typed, most handwritten, on ruled paper, napkins, postcard backs. Angry ink, heavy crossings out, misspellings laced with venom or regret. Some said what they hadn't had the nerve to say aloud. You ruined the game. You don't belong. Go back. Others were quieter but not kinder. Then, years later, more began to come. Not many, but enough. Envelopes with shaky handwriting. I was wrong, some said. I watched with my father and didn't know better. A few asked for forgiveness. One simply said, I owe you more than you know. He never read them in public. Never responded. He treated them like thorns fallen from an old branch, once sharp, but now dry and dulled by time. He kept them not for vengeance but memory. A reminder of what it had really been. Of what it meant to step into the batter's box with more than a pitcher bearing down on you. Of what it cost to keep your voice level when history was anything but. He showed the box once to his daughter. They sat under the same porch light that had lit so many Georgia nights. He opened it, slowly, as if the letters might stir awake once touched again. She read a few in silence, her brow tightening, breath catching on words she could hardly believe someone had written to her father. He didn't cry. He didn't reach for anger. He just said, these came with the job. Then closed the box and slid it back without ceremony. He didn't carry the words anymore. Only the knowing. Only the memory of a man standing still while the world around him dared him to fall over. In time, that box became part of the house. Unmoving, dust-covered, quiet, but it stayed, not because he needed to remember the hate, but because he needed to honor what he endured. The strength it took, to rise, to swing, to run, To endure while refusing to become what they expected. He had never once let those letters shape the swing. But he let them live beside the truth. That dignity, held long enough, can outlast even the darkest ink. And that silence, when chosen, can thunder louder than any scream. Few people know the story. Fewer still ask. It was the spring of 1968. America cracked open, its cities burning, its leaders bleeding, its children howling for change no one seemed willing to give. King was gone, shot down on a balcony in Memphis. For Hank, it didn't feel like grief. It felt like silence, like a voice the world couldn't hear anymore, and maybe never had. His chest didn't ache, it pulled, tight, like something sacred had been taken, and nobody stopped to whisper a prayer. He sat alone that night in a hotel room on the road. The lamp on low, the bed made perfectly, untouched. He watched the news until the images blurred. Until the anchor's voice became the hum of everything wrong. And in that stillness, he broke. Not loudly, but enough. Enough to feel the weight of every city he traveled, every restaurant that turned him away, every stare that set his skin on fire. Enough to feel the press of history closing in, asking him not to swing, but to carry it. He stared at his suitcase, packed but unopened, and thought, I've had enough. Not of baseball, of swallowing himself every day before stepping into a world that only wanted the numbers, not the man. Of being proof while never being accepted. He thought about quitting, really thought, not as an idea, but as a decision. In that room, 4 walls and a television playing protest clips and ash-ridden streets, he imagined calling it all off. Vanishing, living soft, living small, finding peace somewhere outside the lines. He didn't cry. Hank rarely cried, but he shook. His hand hovered over the phone, ready to call the front desk, ready to call the Braves, ready to write the final chapter not with a swing, but a no. Then, the call came. His father, voice graveled thick and low with years. He didn't ask how Hank was. Didn't ask what he planned. Just said, "We don't quit, son. Not when we're being watched." 7 words. That's all. But Hank folded then. Not in defeat, in return. To something older than himself. Something passed down through fields and blood and southern dust. A lineage that wore silence like armor and pain like prophecy. He stayed, wrapped tape around his fingers, put on the uniform, walked back out into dugouts as if the world hadn't just lost its compass. In interviews, they asked about Kane. He answered carefully, not because he didn't feel it, but because they didn't want the whole truth. They wanted composure, poise, Hank, so he gave them that. While inside, every at-bat became more than contact, it became testimony. He didn't quit, not just because his father said not to, but because walking away would feed their belief that some men were only here for the game, not the ground it was played on. And Hank? He had decided, if he was going to be a symbol, it would be one he shaped. No fists raised, no press release, just presence, just that swing, over and over, a gentle defiance carved in pine, testament not to power, but to staying, to standing. The air around him softens with years. His stride is slower now, measured, like each step is a memory being born instead of taken. Sometimes, when he walks through old stadiums or down hallways lined with portraits, people hush themselves. Not out of fear or instruction, but reverence. Like passing beneath a vaulted ceiling, light filtering through glass older than any one name. They say, "That's Hank Aaron." But what they mean is, that's who we want to become when we tell ourselves stories about grace. He no longer swings a bat, but the rhythm's still in him. When he stirs his coffee, when he folds his hands during interviews, when he speaks at podiums with his voice low, each word shaped with the same care he once gave a curveball. Children, some now grown, still come. They ask the same question in different ways. How did you keep going when you weren't supposed to? And he always smiles, always sighs. Then says, because it was mine. And nobody was going to take it from me. He visits schools now. Walks into gymnasiums where a dozen versions of his younger self sit with wide eyes and unsure hearts. He doesn't promise them greatness. Doesn't offer shortcuts. He just tells them the truth. That patience isn't weakness. That excellence takes time. That there's power in showing up when you're tired, polite when you're angry, ready even when nobody applauds. He looks into their eyes like he's searching for something, and often, he finds it. At one event, a child asks if he remembers his 715th home run. He pauses, then says, I remember the sound before it. Not the crack, but the silence. The wait, the crowd waiting to breathe again. He tells them that greatness isn't the swing. It's the silence before it. The choice to step in anyway. At ceremonies, they hang medals around his neck. In museums, they cast his image in bronze. Stitch his jersey in glass, preserved, admired. But he visits quietly. During off hours if he can. Wanders past his own plaque like it belongs to someone else. Sometimes, his wife walks beside him. She knows the parts no statue can hold. The nights he didn't sleep. The letters he didn't burn. The pressure that never once left, even now when the world calls him legend. He receives honors from governors, presidents, strangers. But when a janitor quietly says, "Thank you," in the corner of an elevator, he grips the man's hand and says, "That means something." Because to Hank, it does. All of this, the games, the records, the weight carried not through pride but principle, it wasn't about being the best. It was about being what they said couldn't exist. Strong, quiet, unshaken. He doesn't seek televisions anymore, but sometimes a highlight plays when he's near. Himself, decades younger, rounding third under a sky packed with flashbulbs. He watches without flinching, not for nostalgia, but for the reminder. That boy existed, still exists, still lives in the patience of every kid in a backlot field, swinging a stick at dusk. He places hand over heart each time a young player carries the game a little further forward. And if they ask how they'll know when it's theirs, he just nods and says, "You'll hear it, not the cheer, the silence. And one day, you'll step into it. And swing." He lived long enough to see his name stitched into reverence. To see statues carved not to boast, but to bless. Long enough to outlast the boos and the silence after. To watch children mouth his name with a kind of hope that felt like home. He didn't chase immortality, didn't want it, but time, in its quiet wisdom, sometimes chooses for us. Because some stories don't fade. They settle. They root. When Henry Aaron passed, the world didn't shout. It whispered. Came to a stop in dugouts and driveways, in classrooms, kitchens, outfields just starting to green. Players touched their caps. Coaches paused mid-practice. And somewhere in Mobile, Alabama, the wind moved gently through pine trees again. Full circle. He never claimed to be the best. But he carried the weight of being better when it mattered. Better than hate. Better than fear. Better than what they tried to do to him. And he did it without noise. Without demand. Just with the same quiet swing. Again and again. Until the noise couldn't ignore him anymore. People say records are made to be broken. But not legacies. Not this one. Because it isn't just in the number. It's in every black boy told to wait his turn. Every quiet kid who doesn't shake the room but shapes it by staying. It's in the stillness before the swing. In the grace that follows. Long after his last at-bat. Long after the final cheer fell quiet. He was still here. In the posture of patience. In the tone of dignity. In the reverence of knowing who you are. Without ever needing to prove it. He didn't leave behind a crown. He didn't need to. He left a path. For the rest of us to walk. Softly, surely, and in time.